Through gaming history, many titles have attempted gameplay that involves transforming into beasts. Perhaps most notably would be Sega's 1988 beat-em-up classic, Altered Beast. In this game, players took on the role of a resurrected warrior chosen by Zeus, who could transform into various powerful monsters upon collecting 3 power-ups. These brutes included everything from dragons to werewolves. Who doesn't remember Altered Beast? Come on now.
Bruh.
Or maybe some of you recall the 1997 fighting game series Bloody Roar, originally known as Beasterizer. Thank God they didn't stick with that name. Playing very much like other 3D fighters of that era, such as Virtua Fighter and Tekken, players were able to transform into entities such as a fox or even a gorilla, and then mix together powerful combinations and special attacks. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, those were some pretty damn good games, and Coridden, an action monster shifting RPG, would like to join that exclusive club. But did Coridden get me up off the floor and have me doing the dinosaur, or is it like a T-Rex that can't grasp the controller with its tiny arms? Big ambition, but unable to reach its potential. Well, let's find out in our full review. Real quick, leave behind the dinosaurs of gaming media and head over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames, where you can gain exclusive perks like Discord access, early ad-free shows, shoutouts at the end of every single video we produce, a podcast 3 days early, and so much more. Your new indie gaming community is waiting for you. As I touched on during my intro, Coridden is an action RPG for up to 4 players where you'll gain the ability to transform into different feral beasts by defeating them throughout your adventures. The game can be enjoyed either alone or with local or online co-op. Our narrative revolves around the city of Asha, which has been seized by evildoers, forcing humans to flee and find somewhere else to live. After 2 long centuries, a new city is formed called Quilon, but things aren't quite the same. The city hosts a massive arena where warriors fight to the death, while outside, monstrous beasts lurk. While many adventurers seek the ancient technology of the past, trapped within the remnants of Asha, and now sealed underneath a magical barrier, few have been able to survive the onslaught of beasts as they travel the perilous lands to reach this once proud city. Now the barrier itself is undergoing unusual changes, flickering wildly and unleashing new, more dangerous creatures. This is where our story begins. The 4 heroes of the game, members of the Deal family who each have their own unique personality traits, find themselves fighting for their lives in the Colosseum, in a tradition that honors the gods. Suddenly, they are whisked away into a strange, new, seemingly technologically advanced world. Within this strange realm lies an AI assistant named Maya, who apparently resides within the gauntlets of our crusaders. But is this AI friend or foe? Well, you'll have to play the game to find out.
Of uncontrolled transformations. I've seen it happen before. If that were to occur, you could lose control not just over your body, but your mind as well.
Coridden's story isn't particularly compelling, mainly because the entire premise feels like a waste of time. There's nothing all that fascinating about being tied to your gauntlets, and honestly, the characters introduced throughout this 10 to 15 hour adventure don't do much to add to the story. It's all a bit boring, contrived, and uneventful. In other words, the narrative feels like a vehicle to explain the gameplay elements of Coridden, and not much else. I can almost hear the conversations around this game in my head. Hey, what if we made a monster catching game where instead of capturing the creatures, you become them? Well, how do we explain that? I don't know. Magical gauntlets? Cool! Alright, so the narrative isn't much to write home about, but from a gameplay standpoint, Coridden at least plays well enough and even has a few interesting ideas, mainly with its transformation element. If you're familiar with classic releases such as Champions of Norath or the more commonly known Diablo, you'll have a decent idea of what to expect here. Players will traverse various areas, completing a main quest line and picking up plenty of side quests along the way. You'll slash down foes, equip new weapons and items, gain levels, purchase items in towns, just about everything you've come to expect from the genre. Coridden nails the basics down soundly enough. Combat feels decent despite a pretty obnoxious stamina bar, equipping and leveling up are relatively smooth experiences, and even tracking quests isn't all that bad. However, none of these systems are particularly exceptional either. It feels a bit odd to complain about a game doing everything just fine, but this is only because other games have already done just about everything presented here, and it's been done better. In essence, Coridden executes the fundamentals competently, yet it struggles to stand out in a crowded field where many titles have already perfected these elements. This This means that the main draw here is going to be the transformation gameplay, which admittedly is a pretty cool feature. While you can certainly defeat enemies in your human form using standard attacks and magical abilities that you'll gain through the game's built-in skill tree, you'll also unlock beast forms throughout your adventures and earn the ability to transform into those beasts with the press of a button. Beasts are often quicker than humans, can spit elemental attacks, and even bulldoze their way through blocked paths that were otherwise unreachable. Heck, one player can even hop on the back of a creature if they so wish and hitch a ride and attack that way. It's amusing, but it's not always practical. Meanwhile, the wildlings' close-range melee attacks feel limited in comparison to humans, meaning that switching between both adds a bit of tactical depth to the otherwise familiar enemy encounters. Creatures also level up individually and come with skill trees of their own. It's another thing to manage for sure, but overall the developers have done a nice job of streamlining the menus and making things relatively simplistic, despite some elements of the game perhaps being able to benefit from better explanations. The biggest issue I had with the combat, however, would be the aforementioned stamina bar, which felt like it had no benefit outside of slowing down the pace of combat. Often I would have to meander about and avoid enemies until it recharged, killing the overall flow of battle. Also, because it's very easy to simply run away from enemies, recharge your health, and then return to those combat zones to continue the battle, the action in Coridden can sometimes come to a crawl and rarely feels challenging. There are some difficulty options available, and I only played on standard myself, but at least in 2-player mode, it was extremely rare to die. Even if one partner falls, reviving them just isn't all that difficult. In fact, if you wander around long enough, they'll respawn on their own after about 30 seconds or so. So ultimately, while Coridden gets a lot right with its combat, the pacing and difficulty issues can detract from the overall experience. While you do earn gold in Coridden and subsequently lose an amount of it should you fall in combat, it never feels all that necessary to collect in the first place when you are constantly adding to your inventory via fallen loot and treasure chests strewn about the world. This means that both shopping and the currency system itself could have almost not existed, and the game wouldn't have been worse for it. Traversal, however, is handled very well, with the game having plenty of checkpoints, a solid fast travel method, and a well-crafted map that includes footnotes to ensure you'll never feel lost. I can appreciate that the developers respect the player's time here, ensuring they always stay on track and don't waste time having no clue where to go next. This is a pet peeve of mine in many games, but rarely an issue here. One thing worth noting is that some platforming is required throughout gameplay, and it's serviceable, but definitely not great. Unfortunately, the world itself is rather bland and uninspired, despite some creative creature designs and lovely animations for those creatures. Environments feel pretty stagnant, human characters are mostly uninteresting and poorly acted, and overall the game looks rather dated and dull. Additionally, it is hampered by some performance issues, with the frame rate feeling uneven at times, and the game occasionally suffering from massive hitches that nearly freeze the gameplay entirely. Nothing a few patches can't fix, mind you, but the overall art design of Coridden reminds me of an older, flatter PS2 game. There's nothing all that remarkable in its sound design either, with no standout voice performances, generic orchestrated tracks, and dull sound effects. Obviously, Coridden was made on a budget, and unfortunately, it does show in its presentation. While Coridden has no shortage of flaws, I honestly had a better time playing it than I anticipated. The combat isn't perfect, but the monster shifting mechanic is fun, the exploration is quite impressive for an indie release, and hey, being able to play with friends both locally and online, that's always a plus. With a little more polish, you have to wonder what Coridden could have been. But as it stands, this is a decent romp for a weekend or two, especially if you can grab a couple of your friends. It's not something you'll be thinking about long after your gameplay is concluded, but not every game has to be an instant classic to be fun. Here at I Dream of Indie Games, we believe that games are so much more than a number, which is why we have our 3 Genie Lamp tier system. A bronze lamp represents a good game with quite a few issues, a silver lamp is for a great game with just a few nagging issues, and that elusive golden Genie Lamp of approval, it's for those essential releases that belong in your collection. We also have the Rusty Lantern for mediocre titles that have just a faint glimmer of hope, and the dreaded Indie Krampus for the releases you should avoid. And with all of that said, I'm going to award Coridden the Bronze Genie Lamp of Approval. For far too long, you, the gamer, have been denied honest gaming coverage. Indie developers and publishers have lost their voice, but no longer. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and head over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames to join this epic campaign for indie visibility. The echo chamber trembles as our message grows louder. Voice to the voiceless!